Welcome, everyone, once again to the Roundtable, your editors and publishers podcast at the American Mind and the Claremont Institute. I am your host today, Ryan Williams, president of the Claremont Institute and publisher of the American Mind and the Claremont Review Books. I'm joined by managing editor of the American Mind, Mike Sabo, and associate editor of the Claremont Review Books, Spencer Clavin. They are both in the belly of the beast, so we'll hear in a minute a little bit about NatCon on day one. But first, I just wanted to do some breaking news, and this won't be as breaking. We usually air this a day and a half after we record. So breaking today, this is how The Hill reported it in their email update. Trump announces Space Command's Alabama move, addresses rumors he was dead.
Now, see, I've been running around from like panel to panel for the last who knows how many hours. So this is actual breaking news for me, like live in real time. I have not yet heard this information, but there was a rumor circulating, wasn't there? That because he had like a hand.
Yeah. The Blue Sky went into full overdrive on this question. There was some bruise on the hand, and the last person who'd had such a bruise died soon after. And Trump, everyone was kind of not in DC last week, especially in the run up to Labor Day weekend. So yes, apparently the Blue Sky rumor was that Trump had actually died.
It was so sadistic. I mean, I know this is sort of boomer and naive of me to be shocked by, but the grotesquerie of the relish with which people on X too, libs on X, who I guess were just migrating over from Blue Sky, because it was like a kind of weird, watered down, like we have Weetabix at home version of the Biden health problems. That was obviously what they were enjoying about it, is the thought that maybe Trump would also be sort of out of commission, and that this was the right just doing the exact same thing that Democrats did, which even if he were actually on death's door, it would be still nowhere near the same thing. But it was really gross the way they were like just cackling about, oh yeah, Trump is old and dying. Ha ha ha.
I think Tim Walz today, maybe? I think it was today. I saw some video clip on X about how he had routine dreams that he would wake up and Trump would be dead the next day, trying to act all Waltz, trying to act all
tough. Low, we go high.
Yeah, that's right. The only real news is that Space Command is going to be in Alabama. There's been this fight for years now about where its headquarters is going to be. It's temporarily in Colorado, and Trump had wanted to move it to Alabama at the end of his first term. Then Biden decided on Colorado, which is where it was as an interim matter. And now it's going to be in Alabama. Now there's like a non-story that this is just Trump rewarding a red state, but it does look like it's going to be about $400 million cheaper to do it in Alabama, which has the Army Redstone Arsenal, Army Space and Missile Defense Command, and a NASA center. So it's not like Alabama's out of the blue. It's going to be in Huntsville. And the only lame, but it should be in Colorado thing I saw, which is the only thing I saw, which was also lame, was a lot of the Coloradans who work currently at Space Command are not going to want to move to Alabama, so we're going to have a personnel gap. But that's about the extent of it. So good news for Huntsville. Katie Britt, senator from Alabama, was praising it. So there's not much else to say about that. I did want to ask you two, though, about NatCon, which started today, runs Wednesday and Thursday, concludes Thursday night. I'm going to fly out very early tomorrow, so I'll be there Wednesday morning. Spencer, you want to lead us off? You spoke today, didn't you?
Sure. Yeah. No, I like a kind of large language model. I had the hallucination that I was speaking on Wednesday, and then looked up my schedule and realized, no, it's actually this morning, like an hour after I get off the plane. So that was sort of an exhilarating experience. But
I bet.
Yeah, it's my first NatCon. I don't know, Mike, it's your first one too, right?
Mine too. Yep.
So it's interesting because this has become a really central gathering point of the year for the conservative movement. It has risen up in profile year on year to the point now where it's a veritable rogues gallery, who's who. Not to give anybody any ideas, but if you wanted to take out like half of the most vigorous intellects on the right, myself excluded. But, if you wanted to just like decimate the intellectual horsepower of the conservative movement, you could really just do it with a well-placed IED at this hotel. But yeah, so I gave a little talk about AI and language, which is my current obsession. I'm writing a new book about it. And there was a panel on AI ethics. And it is kind of news. It's always newsworthy, but this week in particular, it is kind of key to a newsy segment for us because last week, I don't know if you guys saw, ChatGPT had not one, but two very high profile and really bad cases of one 16-year-old boy who was talking about wanting to commit suicide, and ChatGPT was like coaching him on optimal noose placement. And then there was a maniac, a guy who believed that his mother was watching over him and having the government surveil him. And ChatGPT basically affirmed him, as large language models tend to do. They spit back what you're hoping to hear. And so it basically told him this seems like a reasonable thing. And then he went ballistic and killed her and himself. This after a big high profile piece in the New York Times about a girl who had basically used a Reddit prompt to turn ChatGPT into her therapist and then also killed herself. So ChatGPT and AI did not create the existence of disturbed individuals or people that have suicidal ideation. None of that is like new or invented by Sam Altman or to be laid at the feet of these AI companies. But these cases have raised in a very big way dire ethical concerns that dovetail with things that we would also ask about, like in what way is this technology aligned with our humanity, and in what way are the people making this technology totally uninterested in or even disdainful of the classical ideal of human person as an embodied soul, as a creature uniquely capable of processing and communicating and experiencing logos, the word. So my case basically was that, look, I use Grok. Lots of people, there's all sorts of positive, beautiful use cases for this technology, but the primary thing to recollect is that they're not us. And the one way of understanding the fact that they're not us is with an ancient idea about parrots. I told a joke about a parrot in a store window, which I won't like bore you guys with here, but like basically the ancients were fascinated by parrots because they clearly had external language, but not internal language. That is, they could verbalize the sounds of the words you're currently hearing, but they were incapable of producing them in a way that demonstrated inward rationality. So I was arguing that we should recover this ancient idea about the inner word and the outer word. Because if we want to think about what ChatGPT is or what any large language model is, it's basically a machine for discerning and predicting patterns in the outer word, in the exterior products of language making. And the question that the technologists will face us with is, well, how is that different from what we're doing here on this podcast? And the answer is that our outer words, although in some cases indistinguishable at a material level from the machine's outer words, are verifiably and demonstrably, and also evolutionarily, interestingly, clearly products of the inner word, which the machine doesn't have and isn't even trying to reproduce. And so all of its limitations, all of its dangers, all of its power is sort of set by that fact, and is why, for instance, you can ask it to help you mix a cocktail, but probably shouldn't ask it to be your therapist or your priest. Anyway, that was my talk. And then there was a bunch of other stuff. I also went over and did Johnny Burtka's new ISI podcast at Heritage. It's an exciting. I'm excited to just now sort of sit back. It's always good to go early because now I get to sit back and Ryan watch your talk and bop around, glad hand and schmooze.
Yeah, so the ISI podcast, this is the one where everyone's in that faux living room talking.
That's right. In the basement, it turns out. Maybe I shouldn't reveal this.
It's a fake DC studio. There are many of them.
Right.
Exactly.
The last one featured Curtis, Motley Crue, including our colleague Chris Caldwell, but also not our colleague, but a man some of us know, Curtis Yarvin, Patrick Deneen, and Chris Rufo, former Lincoln Fellow of ours. It was an interesting discussion. Who were your interlocutors?
Well, first of all, I want to say that first episode they told me is now at 1.5 million views after having gotten deplored by Jonah Goldberg.
Yeah.
And, defended by Chris Rufo and just generally bandied about online as this football. for reasons that I suspect all our listeners will be able to guess. But I was in it with Leila Bresco, who's actually a college buddy of mine, and now eloquent pro-life writer about women's issues, but also just social issues more generally. Johnny Burtka is the host, who's always there. Gladden Pappin is on my episode, and there was one other person, Michael Toscano. Oh, and Rachel Bovard. So a very fun crew, a less, I don't know, headline generating crew, perhaps less controversial, shall we say, public figures. So I doubt we'll get 1.5 million views, but it was really fun.
Well,
and we're talking about also AI.
Here are my questions of Grok from last night. You guys can maybe guess the reason. Finish the limerick that starts, "There once was a man from Nantucket." And it gave me this garbage clean one. And I'm like, do the version with profanity. And then Albert was like, "Well, what is that one?" I'm like, "I can't read it to you. You're too young." And he started crying. And I said to Grok, "Give me a clean kids' version," which wasn't that funny. Make it. And then my next one was, "Make it bathroom humor for a 10-year-old boy," because my 6.5-year-old is very advanced. So the best one that we settled on, and forgive me, listeners, this will be a little childish, but it was supposed to be, "There once was a man from Nantucket who farted so loud in his bucket, it echoed around, made a hilarious sound, and his pals laughed so hard they all chucked it." It wasn't bad.
I mean, proof that some things remain eternal about humanity, which is that you can always get a group of 3 guys together and elicit a laugh with a fart joke.
Yes,
I would give that if I were grading it a C-, Ryan.
It's you know, it was also prompted by I forget why this came up. Oh, I just said we need to start reading more poetry. So Amelia gleefully ran upstairs and grabbed Where the Sidewalk Ends. So I started dipping in and out of Shel Silverstein. And actually, Albert thought a lot of those were hilarious.
That guy was a genius. Yeah. I think he's up there with Dr. Seuss as one of the great children's poets.
Oh, yeah. I would totally agree with that. Definitely.
It was good fun. So I look forward to reading more of them.
Did you have Shel Silverstein as a kid, Ryan?
I did. I think we dipped into it once. It was not a big part of my young literary life. So it was fun for me to reacquaint myself with it, having not really internalized it much.
Nice. Yeah. One thing I've noticed about chatbots is that if you don't know anything about the area that you're quizzing it on, they amaze you. And if you go into any topic that you really know about, they're not that impressive. So like for us, all of us here usually, I guess, spend time reading poetry and in general, like thinking about literary style. Nobody has ever brought me a poem written by ChatGPT that I was like, ooh, that's really, really striking. Like, they're always incredibly mediocre. But then somebody's like, look at this image I made with ChatGPT, and I, who have absolutely no visual sensitivity or intelligence whatsoever, I'm like, I can't believe it can paint like Da Vinci. And of course, that's not true. It's just it's the Michael Crichton rule, where Michael Crichton pointed out that when you read a newspaper story about something you know about, you realize that journalists are idiots and don't know anything. It's basically that.
Yeah. Well, good. Thanks, Spencer. I look forward to watching your talk. Maybe we'll even publish it.
I was going to say, your talk sounds like a pretty good fit at a website that we all know and love. So,
or do you mean AmericanMind.org?
I think that is. I think it's AmericanMind.org, actually, in fact. It's amazing. Came up with the same one.
How's it been for you, Mike? You're here in a press capacity, right? So you're like covering.
Yes. So was able to get a press pass, and I've really enjoyed it so far. I mean, this is my first one too, as well. I went to the plenary session this morning. So Rachel Bovard, Kevin Roberts, Yoram Hazani, and Kevin's speech. Actually, we're going to be publishing at the American Mind on Thursday. So looking forward to that. Having him here again. Yoram's speech was very interesting. It was. Look, we are in power. We've had success, a great success. I mean, you think about all the people associated with national conservatism that are now serving the administration. Michael Anton, Elbridge Colby, and that's just foreign policy. David Goldman, one of our fellows. It just goes on and on and on and on. So he says, he's waking up every day very excited, very happy, and he said he's usually not. He's usually quite a pessimist. So this is a big turn for him, and his wife has certainly noticed that. So he just, basically called, it was calling out everyone saying, look, this is a great time. And, there's been a lot of infighting, unfortunately, recently, especially even in national conservatism circles. And he just basically said, look, know what time it is, cut it out. We are in a position like we've never been in before, even with Reagan and even with other past Republican administrations. And that we are taking advantage of things and doing great work, and we need to continue. And we also need to stop the sniping. We are a political coalition. So obviously there's going to be some disagreements. There's religious disagreements, even disagreements, obviously, on strategy, that kind of thing. But that we really need to cut out a lot of the stuff that, unfortunately, I think has been happening that I've seen a bit. That we need to work together, and this is such a key time for us, and really key to America's golden age. I mean, we could be in an age where you have 4 years of Trump, 8 years of JD Vance, 8 years of Marco Rubio, 8 years of somebody else. I mean, obviously, the Democrats to the left, they're going to win again. But I mean, why wouldn't it be out of the realm of possibility for us to basically pull what the Democrats did, say, in the 20th century, where it was just, Democrat reign for a very long time? I mean, with Trump's success, with him winning the popular vote, with movements like NatCon, places obviously like Claremont, being kind of the intelligence node of this operation, like, yeah, why shouldn't this be a possibility? So I really liked his optimism there. And then I also went to a panel, so hosted by the chair was Eric Tietzel, so Lincoln Fellow in my class last year, and Nathan Pinkoski. We published him very recently a couple times, and really, really good pieces. Jim
Also,
Hansen,
another Lincoln alum, Nathan, was
yes,
the wonderful and never repeated year of 2020. I say wonderful because we got upgraded to a much nicer hotel in the hotel group, and which we would never pay for
right,
fellowship.
Right. That was like one of the years I came out and visited you guys. And it was incredibly, I think it was the first time I had seen a Claremont Fellowship in action. And I was like,
oh yeah, you were spoiled forever.
No.
It's like, this is the way it is. Wow.
Yeah. Nathan's such a great dude. And the Yorm speech you're describing, which unfortunately I hadn't shown up for yet, is interesting also in that one thing we don't appreciate enough is if the right ends up on a winning streak, as you say, of course, the left will eventually regain power, but we will have an effect on the kind of left that emerges to eventually win again. And that's been a theme of this podcast for us, right? Is what coalition on the left is going to win? Well, it's likely to be a different kind of left if they're fighting back from, 8 to 16 years of conservative consensus than if it's a left basically immediately responding to this Trump term.
Right. Like, is it one, that's actually semi-coherent and actually rational, where we actually find some agreement on actual ends? That would be really good. That would be to the benefit of this country. I mean, what's happening right now, we don't want that going forward. I mean, this is not good for our country at all. So I think to have at least some reasonably, recognizable left that at least is patriotic and actually loves America and shows that would be a big change, and that would be a very good thing. So yeah, so that's certainly a benefit of a resurgent right that has power for a long time. It's not only going to reorient obviously our side, but the left too, and in turn, if they're out in the political wilderness for years and possibly even decades, I mean, they're going to have to change whether they like it or not.
Yeah, it's for those that want to. For the wonky amongst the crowd who doesn't already listen to Henry Olson's podcast, he had Bill Galston on last week. They usually record on Thursdays, I think, or they go up on Thursdays. So you can go check it out. But Bill and Henry talk about the left losing to Reagan and then realizing that they probably weren't going to field anyone who could beat Reagan's reelection in '84, and then somewhat surprisingly losing the '88 election. At one point, George H.W. Bush in the spring was down 17 points heading into '88 into November, or in the spring before November. And that Bill said, this led to the conditions that made Bill Clinton, who was considered much too conservative for the National Democratic ticket, 2 years earlier or 3 or 4 years earlier, to be their choice. And of course, Bill Galston was in the middle of the triangulation and recalibration and the moving of the center of the Democratic Party to the right in the form of Bill Clinton and the machine around him and the think tank that they used as a vehicle for that new shift. And so it'll be interesting to see the what and the when of the new Democratic Party. Should they? They're going to do some version of this. We've talked a lot about it. Wither the Democratic Party in coming years. I think they will have no choice but to have to go back to the center and the right, were they to lose in 2028. At that point, Solzhenitsyn's pitiless crowbar of events will have whacked them enough times that they'll conclude that they have to change in order to survive. But a lot can happen between now and then, including the obvious possibility of a Democrat winning the election in 2028 of whatever flavor. All right. Well, we did want to talk about, it's now almost a week old, but we don't have to spend too much time on it, but it's worth just raising it and discussing it a bit. This awful shooting at the Annunciation Catholic School last Wednesday by 23-year-old Robin Westman, formerly Robert, killed 2 children by firing through the windows, had a handgun and I think 2 long guns, but don't quote me, killed an 8-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl, killed himself at the scene. Typically, the media playing off of quote unquote officials are still trying to determine the motive. But there's evidence of him having these notebooks full of rantings, including some in Cyrillic, which is odd, with defend equality, the LGBTQIA flag, various anti-Semitic and anti-Catholic ramblings as well. His mother worked at the school and he had attended it earlier in life. And it's just another example of, I should get ahead of myself. Ilhan Omar and others were lamenting the fact that the right was using this incidence of crazy trans madmen shooting kids as a club against the left or against trans identity as such. But we're all just kind of noticing the fact that in recent years, mass children shootings have been disproportionately perpetrated by mentally deranged male to female trans people. I don't know what other conclusion we're supposed to draw. Trying to determine the motive, it seems the motive was mental illness and instability, probably not helped, but rather exacerbated by the reigning left-wing identity politics issue du jour of recent years, which is the notion that you are whatever sex you think you are. And the imperative of the mental health community, let alone the media and everyone, and even your parents in some states, the state interposing itself between you and your child, should you choose to not indulge this sort of thing. The imperative is to affirm, affirm, affirm. And this is another data point, a very sad one amongst us dissenters, that perhaps nature is not just a word game.
Yeah, I've been keeping my front hole shut about this event until this moment. I was actually saving my sorrow and righteous indignation for this podcast because I thought this is the only venue where we have even a chance of addressing this in a sensible way. Like, it's so obviously unspeakably dreadful when these shootings happen, especially when children are involved, and it is impossible to discuss the situation in a reasonable and rational way in most public fora at this point because of the way the politics shakes out. So that in itself is sort of a national disgrace, in addition to the terrible tragedy that we're confronted with here. And I think it's worth addressing this accusation that conservatives are pouncing once again and using a lone individual, an isolated actor, as some kind of emblem or stand-in for our larger social hobby horse. We're really not doing that. Like, there are always going to be a few people who say dumb things on social media, but in the main, the narrative that has emerged on the right out of this event is not all trans people are potential mass shooters, or even that this kid's confusion about his sex was in some way directly related to his mania and homicidal rage, except insofar as it seems impossible not to talk about the fact that they are both outgrowths, the trans confusion, difficulty, and the fury, the mutilation of and death of these innocent children are both the actions of a highly disturbed individual, and the mode in which he was expressing his transness is evidence of like deep psychological disturbance. And that's not really a hateful thing, or even placing blame specifically for this shooting on anyone but the person that did the shooting. You have to talk about that guy's actions also in the context of a culture which deplores his gun violence, but encourages and even celebrates the other major outworking of his mental illness. The thing that most disturbed me about his notebook, which was publicized and sort of poured over online, is a passage where he says, I'm sick of being trans, but I can't go back. It would be so embarrassing to admit that this was a mistake. And again, the fact that he felt that way is not why he did this. And the people who made him feel that way are not to blame for this atrocity in the same way that he is. But it fills me with sorrow to think of this disturbed individual discipled in a philosophy of mutilation, self-mutilation, who discovered that he couldn't attain the bliss he was promised by rending his own flesh, and then turned away instead to rend the flesh of others. Like, this is just a way that, I notice, I discern in that a completely recognizable psychological profile of somebody who is being seduced and ultimately destroyed by demonic activity. And I don't know any other way to describe it. The event itself is so demonic. That the people who have encouraged or facilitated the situation in which this kid ends up, where he feels like he can't go back on his statement that he's trans, is to me just utterly deplorable. And when my friend Michael Knoll says that transgenderism as a philosophy has to be eradicated from public life, I think this is kind of what he's talking about. But I will just shut up in a second here but first I will say that, all of that having been said, the vast majority of our sympathy and our sorrow and our grief here should be, of course, with these children and with their parents. It's also very easy to get caught up psychologizing the killer, when what we should be saying and thinking about is like, we pray every day for these poor kids and their families.
No, I think that's exactly right. Unfortunately, with everything being so politicized, we tend to focus on, the shooter. We tend to focus on what he did. And it's like, let's focus first of all on the two kids who were killed, the other kids who had to go through this, horrific thing, for, that Catholic parish, especially for the Catholic Church at large to have faced something like that, for that community. So yeah, our prayers are definitely with them. And also, thinking about prayers too, I just can't help but just feel, just anger and fury at the Democrats, Gavin Newsom, Jen Psaki, and others, who are basically, making fun of prayer. Throwing the whole thing under the bus, throwing Christianity under the bus. Gavin Newsom's whole thing, mocking prayer. I don't know what else to call that than demonic, honestly. Obviously not on the level as what the shooter did, but still, it's insane to have a politician of his rank, who's clearly obviously going to be running in 2028 and seems to be by far the front runner, mock prayer in that way. That to me is, people talked about, oh, Trump, this is, he can't do this. This is disqualifying. That to me is whatever else, Gavin Newsom stands for, which I disagree with pretty much almost all of it, probably wholeheartedly. That to me is absolutely disqualifying. That is insane and outrageous, and that shouldn't have a place in America at all. Something like that.
He also roped the kids into it too.
Yeah.
His tweet was, it wasn't quite this, but the sentiment of it was, screw you people offering your prayers. The kids were praying when they got shot.
Right.
Well, a little bit like the slavering relish with which the possibility of Trump's death was greeted.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of rationale behind that Gavin Newsom tweet was such a tortured and attenuated chain of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want this event to be about gun control and only about gun control, right? That's step one, is whenever these events happen, we must immediately exclude all other causation and environmental factors so that we can get down to abolishing the Second Amendment or rendering it null with all sorts of legislation. And so therefore, we need to morally delegitimize anybody who talks about any other cause of this event or takes any other action than taking people's guns away. And therefore, we need to respond to people who are praying for these devastated families, not with a kind of solidarity, but with moral revulsion and condemnation. And we need to tell them that their prayers mean nothing. And that they are hollow because they are hypocrites who believe in the right to bear arms, and therefore we are now anti-prayer. And as part of that, we're going to parade our virtue around by sniggering gleefully at the thought of praying children being killed. Like, that's basically where Gavin Newsom has ended up, and he thinks he's the good guy.
Right. No, that's right. Like, in what you just laid out, I mean, that taking those logical steps one by one, that is such a devastating critique because it just shows, the central workings of the left's mind, which is just at once demonic and just chaotic, deranged. I mean, where that's the first thing they go, the Second Amendment, these hicks out in right wingville. I mean, it's almost, it's just, I don't even have the words for it. It's just totally despicable. It's amazing. Dan McCarthy at the New York Post, he actually had a great piece about this. Very measured, looking into this and just showing how some of the violent rhetoric and things in the trans community and elsewhere, this is not a surprise. I guess there's this cult called the Zizians, and it's a cult for the transgenderism of its leaders and its members made headlines. And I guess there's some alleged involvement in a series of homicides. In January, actually, U.S. Border Patrol agent David Christopher Milland was actually killed. Then there's also, and I saw this actually right after the shooting happened at the Catholic Church. Oregon's Eugene Weekly features a trans man, I think, on the cover, cradling an AR-15 style rifle with a blurb proclaiming, "Some queer folks are armed and ready to bash back." So, I mean, obviously doing absolutely no favors at all. It's like, you would think that the trans community or whatever would have, like, where's their PR firm? I mean, it's crazy to me how completely just out of touch and what this looks like to, probably 80+% of the population. It's just absolute insanity paraded around like, oh, this is fine, to each his own. So yeah, I mean, this is, the whole thing though is just, it's tragic. What the Democrats are doing with it is despicable. And, the right should stand up, and I've seen people stand up and call out this stuff. And I think it just needs to happen to show people again more and more. And I think the American people are waking up to this, to show how the left operates. It's all about politics. It's all about winning for them. It's all about victory at any cost. I mean, they'll seemingly do anything to make that happen.
Can I say another thing that's not crazy or evil or vile to say and think about is, and I don't actually know whether we're clear yet how much of an effect this had in this particular case, but some of the other shootings in which trans people were involved, hormones make you crazy. Like, they make you crazy when you're going through puberty. Boys and girls both in different ways become volatile, difficult to manage. Like, you have
Moody.
to learn to navigate and take control over the effects of hormones on your body. And so it is not insane to propose that if you take somebody who is already, by his or her own admission, mentally unwell, like suffering from psychological distress, sometimes to the extent of suicidal ideation, and then you pump them full of crazy juice, like, besides the fact that it won't turn you into the opposite sex, it might also aggravate your problems. Like, that's a thing that is just not, again, I'm not saying that I have special knowledge about how this operated in this particular case, but I can, again, you can imagine the Media Matters bots like getting ready to just crawl all over this soundbite and clip it and feel like they can just present this idea as if it were obviously and self-evidently retrograde, ignorant, and hateful and prejudiced. And it's simply not. It's totally normal to ask a question like that. And it seems as if like this is another reason why you probably shouldn't monkey around with human biology at this level. Again, not because everybody who takes hormones is going to become a murderous psychopath, but because if you take mentally unstable individuals and you fill them up with hormones, you don't know what's going to happen. You genuinely don't.
Right. It's just a toxic combination. So why are we surprised, when we basically throw a grenade in and something bad's going to happen? Also, there was another interesting take, too. I saw that this shooter actually worked at like a vape shop for a couple months. And somebody on X kind of connected that with, well, you don't know what's in those, that could have combined with hormones to cause some, further toxic combination. So, something worth to consider.
Yeah. I will just note, Mike, that I realize that sometimes this podcast becomes like Groundhog Day. I'm guilty of it myself, but we did do a whole segment on the Zizians like 2 months ago, maybe.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
I'm having amnesia.
Me too. Total amnesia on that too.
The story about the girl, it was a long Atlantic piece. Well, anyway, I'll have to track it down. Or I'll eat crow and maybe I've hallucinated the whole thing.
I mean, listen, we're all guilty of it sometimes, or at least
right.
I am
Me
increasingly
too.
guilty.
I am too. 2 kids will do that to you.
I have no excuse.
Well, we wanted to talk also about this. Speaking of the Atlantic, an Atlantic piece. I promise listeners we're not going to turn this into one Atlantic piece a week, but it's such a gold mine, and they occasionally unearth some interesting reporting, so that's part of the reason. So this one is The Perverse Consequences of the Easy A by Rose Horowitz, and it's about Harvard and grade inflation at Harvard, a phenomenon that's been ongoing for quite a long time. Friend of Claremont and teacher of our beloved Charles Kessler, Harvey Mansfield, made this an issue years ago when at Harvard he was resisting grade inflation, and so he would give you your real grade and then your ironic grade. He had to give up the actual. He wanted to stick to the old harsh grading system that is the more merit-based system that he was used to after many decades, but he decided that it was too unfair to his students because the one black mark would be the Harvey Mansfield's class. Harvey C- Mansfield was his nickname for a while. But this Harvard piece is amazing in some ways. The opening anecdote is that at the end of term last time, they were one of the administrators was going through, one of the deans was going through how the students were faring that were on their way out, and he chuckled at the 3.8 average grade, and it was recorded that everyone laughed as well. I want to read just a few paragraphs from this. I mean, this has been a problem for years, but apparently it's gotten exacerbated. The pandemic being one big thing. So the pandemic only made it matters worse. One paragraph starts. There's some stats for you. In 2011, 60% of all grades at Harvard were in the A range, up from 33% in 1985. By the 2020-21 academic year, that share had risen to 79%. Students were more anxious than ever, so professors further eroded norms to help them. Taken together, this has led to a regime in which most students get near perfect grades, but the grades mean something different to everyone. Outside observers might still think of grades as an objective assessment of a student's work, and therefore a way to differentiate between levels of achievement. But many professors seem to conceive of them as an endlessly adaptable participation trophy. Claybaugh, one of the Harvard professors interviewed for this, recalled a recent talk with an experienced science professor who told her that some students get A's for excellent work, others get the mark because they're from less privileged backgrounds and demonstrated improvement throughout the semester, and still others get A's because they were doing strong work before a mental health crisis derailed their progress. So pretty much everyone gets A's, Claybaugh told me. That's where we've ended up. Without the threat of poor grades, students have largely stopped trying in their courses. Pinker, this is the famous Steven Pinker of Harvard fame, written some interesting books. Pinker told me that student performance on the multiple choice portion of his final exam, which he has kept mostly the same, has declined by 10 percentage points over the past 2 decades, even as he gives out more A's. An incoming Harvard junior who requested anonymity to avoid affecting her future job prospects, so Harvard, told me that for all the hand-wringing about student self-censorship, her peers mostly don't read text closely enough to form opinions in the first place. I feel like colleges...
It's
Yeah.
so brutal.
Yeah,
It gets
at least
worse.
they're honest.
This was the best follow-on to that paragraph. It's like 2 later. Now that they know that making college easier doesn't reduce stress, Harvard administrators are attempting to rediscover a morsel of lost wisdom from the ancient past. School should be about academics. Now, this paragraph is decidedly tongue-in-cheek, so don't blame the author. In March, the faculty amended the student handbook to emphasize the highly novel point that students should prioritize their schoolwork. The university has advised professors to set attendance policies and make clear that students, contrary to their intuition, are expected to come to class. And it formed a new committee to consider how to rein in runaway grade inflation. Anyway, so they're dealing with that. And then the other interesting, so Harvard students are still Harvard students, especially the top tier of them. So school doesn't matter as much because it's easy to get A's. So obviously they're shifting their resources to more meaningful ways of distinguishing themselves. So the club culture has gotten really cutthroat at Harvard. So like the finance club or the it's not called this, but like the McKinsey Club or whatever. They interview prospective club members. Their admissions rates are like near what Harvard's are for the actual college. And the really exclusive clubs are just that, very exclusive. And so these students are basically maximizing their ways of networking and gaining job skills and neglecting their classes. And I also raise this as particularly alarming in light of this piece that our colleague Chris Caldwell wrote for The Spectator a couple weeks ago. I think we mentioned this, but maybe not in a past episode. But he was just talking about how the rise of AI means that there's going to be a huge, big need. We need more than ever now to have students and young people who in their formative years are able to read and understand good, ancient, modern, postmodern, whatever, but good books and are able to think well, because most of their peers are going to start outsourcing, as they already have, most of their thinking to large language models and this whole AI revolution. So this is just one more layer in which the problem is dire, because we are quickly going to be confronted with very interesting and novel aspects of governance, efficiency, people's place in a rapidly changing economic environment, how to set AI policy, whether we should be sanguine, alarmed, or somewhere in between at the maximalist tendency of some of the tech folks to quickly and as fast as they can create AGI, strong artificial intelligence that then starts making more AI that's better than it. And then we're off to the races with some sort of machine god that can solve all of humanity's problems, cure cancer, eliminate scarcity, take us to Mars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, we will have no one who, for all of Western civilization, what used to be the model of gaining yourself, take your era's version of it, but the equivalent of especially the elites, a liberal education that teaches you to have a well-formed soul and to have drunk well from the wisdom of the past, and all of which will equip you to help rule the country or experience self-rule and representative government alongside your fellow citizens and help all of them make sense of a rapidly changing America. So I like eating our seed corn is not even the right analogy for what's going on here, but this does not bode well for civilization.
Yeah. Your mileage may vary on fears of advanced general intelligence, but I have started to think about this in terms of actually existing AI, in the same way that we have like actually existing socialism, distinct from the pie-eyed fantasies about what socialism could be if true socialism were ever tried. And my reason for this is sufficient unto the day as it's evil. Like I can see the force of some arguments by like Ray Kurzweil or some of these other Eric Hole, like some of these people who speculate and game out what these machines could do if they were perfected. I can also, by the way, see very good structural arguments why inherently they never will achieve that kind of self-directed agentic power. And I just don't think we know the answer. I think it's going to be what it's going to be from at least my perspective. I'm not the person developing this technology, so I don't know what is going to become of it. But I do know what we are currently doing with the machines we already have, which is like writing bad poetry and outsourcing our brains. That's what I see students doing most of the time, or at least that's the bad use case. I've already said I like to use chatbots, but I think, like any technology, the people who are most skilled at using them well and in a way that actually produces better results than you would get without the tool are the people who can get along without it. And so, really, the crucial thing at this juncture, at this current stage, is to find ways of enabling young people, especially, to operate both with and without this machinery in a healthy way. And we have that power. Like, that is not some science fiction made up imaginary, if only we could summon the willpower to figure out how to manage this. No, it's called a liberal arts education. Like, it's called the Viva Voce exam. There are techniques from the medieval era and earlier that exist to train people in self-governance and self-control and a right relationship to their tools and the universe and the world around them, et cetera, et cetera. And what I love about Rose Horowitz, actually, who's somebody I've enjoyed in the past on this subject before, is like that paragraph where she says, here's the thought, like, what if you tried educating people? Like, what if you tried giving people these tried and tested tools for dealing with and coping with all of the challenges they may encounter? What if that actually made the world less stressful for them than if you constantly attempted to reduce all adversity and keep them from any form of challenge or effort or struggle? Like, what if a little bit of stress testing is actually good for the soul? These are all very real possibilities that we sort of know how to cope with, if we have the will, political and otherwise, to activate them. It all ends up with conservatives and classical educators looking like pretty good, like smelling pretty great. The last thing I'll just say is that I, like many of us and many of our friends, like, for my sins, I went to an Ivy League school, and I've spent basically every year since going on podcasts where the host will rant and rave about how evil and corrupt and bad academia is, and then turning to me and saying, my next guest is a Yale and Oxford educated, like as if this were given everything, and this is just the power of these fake A's that this piece is about, right? They give you this diploma, and it could literally mean anything. Like, it could mean you sought out a really rigorous and excellent education, which you can still do at Yale, I will say. Like, it is still possible. Or it could mean that you found a way to game the system and you spent your life like kind of slumming it at the eating clubs. So I just think like the collapse of that system, that credentialing system, is all the good as well.
It's kind of like we've almost instituted, a nationwide system of affirmative action that, I mean, you're elevating people to jobs now who obviously could have no idea what they're doing. They could be the best at it. They could be absolute geniuses, perfect SAT, ACTs. So that's a problem when you do that at scale in a place like the United States. That's the chickens are going to come home to roost someday. And that's actually a great point, Spencer, just about how our kind of, fealty to the idea still that Harvard and Yale are really worth something. And obviously, in a sense, they are. They're still such a cultural power that they still hold. But we should really start thinking of places. I mean, who's actually elite today? How about a school like Hillsdale? I mean, you look at their numbers, you look at their students. I mean, I went to grad school there for 2 years. I doubt I might not even get in there now if I were to reapply. And I certainly, when I was an undergrad or looking to get an undergrad, I don't think there's any way I would have been able to get in with the standards now. I think it was probably even a challenge then. I ended up going elsewhere for undergrad. But so I think on the right, we need to both acknowledge the power that these places still have, but subtly change these things in our own minds and say, no, these things are just hollowed out husks of what they used to be. And we're starting to have some institutions that actually teach the classics, that teach what it takes to be, self-governing citizens of a republic, and actually laud those and talk about them. And have some disdain for kind of the Ivy League, elite and what those universities that, were originally founded by Christians and Protestants of a certain variety, to inculcate, the virtues, obviously, of self-governing people. And I think actually one really good way, another great point, Spencer, to kind of institutionalize, some changes to actually make people, say in math, take away their calculators and make them do it all by hand, would be to have blue books return in a big way. Do not have
we can do this. We have the technology.
Right? Like, we can do this. We just need the imagination. Like, we can do this. We just need to think about it. How about blue books for every, written exam, for every test? Do not have them, maybe they can do some research papers and whatever later, but they have to master the art of writing with a pen in hand first. And to be able to think logically, I mean, this was, I think, basically every class I took in grad school was pretty much blue book exams, the final exams. Even in classes like, say, Dr. Pistrito, his Federalist Papers class, I mean, it was, hey, all 85 Federalist Papers are there to be, tested over. And he gave us, I think, just really short snippets. And it was really hard. It was like, oh, yeah, that's not just even the ones, Federalist 51, Federalist 10. This is Federalist, 31. Hamilton opens up, I think, with some disquisition of logic, which is that one always astounded me, because I think he then turns to matters of economics. But that disquisition, which Hadley Arcus has talked about, I think, at least in a couple of his books, just the kind of mind that the founders had. I mean, we not only, need to recover their principles, we need to recover how they actually thought. I think that's a key too. But just getting back to, we have some imagination, think about these things, do much more in class, do things by voice. I think Thomas Aquinas does that a lot, I think, in their setup. So, and also it shows, there's some triumphalism obviously in there too. I mean, conservatives were obviously right. You go back to, guys like Mortimer Adler, Robert Maynard Hutchins at University of Chicago, especially when Leo Strauss was there. All those guys were absolutely proven right. The modern way ends in absolute failure. And then the modern way has to, the moderns have to recover just the basic building blocks, which were pointed out in that piece in kind of hilarious detail. Like, how about we actually have smart people who actually know something? Wow. So this is all, chickens are coming home to roost. And, in order to really have a golden age, I mean, we need to have, an education that actually matches that. And the start of it is, recognize that we have a problem, which I think is very clear, and then knowing what to do about it. Unfortunately, I think we have, good people in the Trump administration, the Department of Education, and elsewhere, who have lots of good thoughts and ideas to implement that.
The concluding paragraph of this piece is delicious, so I'll read it momentarily. But it illustrates, although it doesn't put it this way, it's kind of almost does it in a backhanded way, but not quite. That the singular focus on Harvard by the administration is very good. And they're not just focused on Harvard, they've been going after Columbia and other schools. But the concluding paragraph is, if Harvard is to succeed where Princeton and Cornell failed, that is, Princeton and Cornell tried to fix their grade inflation in recent years, it will be because the political environment has given its initiative an extra level of urgency. The Trump administration's assault on elite institutions generally, and Harvard in particular, has put the university's public standing at stake. Claybaugh believes that the best way to help Harvard is to acknowledge its flaws and try to fix them. Bringing rigor back to the academic mission seems a natural place to start. Quote, "We should be making sure that we are living up to our mission to restore our legitimacy in people's eyes," she told me. "I don't want people all across America thinking it's a place of ideas I find somehow troubling or offensive, and also no one goes to class."
I'm still on the thing about everyone's worried about intellectual conformity, but nobody's reading closely enough to form any opinions.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's
Yeah.
like this perfect storm of what? Of it's the decline of Western civilization as tracked by the release date of the iPhone. I mean,
Mhm.
Cal Newport and like all the deep work crowd and the fact that Instagram and TikTok are decreasing our attention spans, just social media in general. I don't need to single out those two, but they're particularly bad given their format. And now, on top of all of the rest of that, we have these quote unquote thinking machines that basically allow us to outsource large portions of our brain and the processes of heretofore, since the dawn of civilization, have traveled alongside us. That is the ability to think and reason well and engage with great ideas. It's all going out the window.
And the ability
So,
to use language, not just to like
yes.
return to my current obsession, but the ability to use language as a tool for thought, which is
Yeah.
something many people miss. It's not primarily a tool for expression. It's not even about like the mechanics of grammar, except as a vehicle for clear thought. And as editors, this being an editor's podcast, I think we all like know that that's true.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
If you
pity.
outsource that task, if you say, I have such a brilliant idea, but I need Grok to express it for me, you don't actually have a brilliant
Right.
idea. You just have a kind of inchoate blob of ideas that Grok is going to flatter you into thinking is smart.
Right. If you are unable to convey a truth or an idea or a logical process yourself, you don't really know it. And that either written or verbal. I remember, Mike, to your point, I got a sense that Hillsdale was a cut above, generally speaking, although my reference point was state schools, of course, which is should have been obvious. When I was an undergraduate at Hillsdale, which is now over 20 years ago, and you'd visit friends and acquaintances who are going to Grand Valley State or Michigan State or whatever, and they'd be complaining about their 5-page term paper. And at Hillsdale, we were all just like looking at them like they had 3 heads because
Right.
we'd write as much for one class in like half a week. So we couldn't understand what they're complaining about, but it was a muscle they weren't using much back then, and probably not at Harvard either, it turns out. Well, we did want to talk about Lisa Cook and the Federal Reserve and Trump's, growing and malevolent attempt to take over the entire federal government. That's what the left would say, but we are out of time. So that issue, I think, will still be live next week because she is suing. And in the meantime, for some fun reading for folks, a pretty good piece from our colleague Robert Delahunty, who works, though he's not in DC, does work for the Center for the American Way of Life, and our old friend John Yoo, our loyal opposition, as we joke with him at the fellowships, because we just can't make any headway with John on the question of natural law, being a positivist lawyer like he is. But they have a good piece about the Federal Reserve Board's authorizing legislation, even as it was amended in the 1940s, and its bearing on this question of how much authority Trump has to remove Lisa Cook for cause. And they argue he has plenty. And, while it may be the case that the independent Federal Reserve Board with long terms may be good for economic stability, it nonetheless flies in the face of our constitutional structure. So everyone should stop being so crazy about this question of Trump's takeover of otherwise and previously neutral experts. So that gives us just quick culture round. I have nothing that interesting other than just to say, for those of you who are fans of it, you will become even more of a super fan each time you rewatch it. So I am rewatching Justified, which you always forget, and then when you revisit it, you are reminded with great joy about one of the most wonderful things about that show is the dialogue that is given to and the delivery from the character Boyd Crowder, who is played by Walter Goggins. It's just one of the
Walton Goggins.
Walton Goggins, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got a wonderful style and delivery. It's a wonderfully played part. So much so that the first season, which was kind of a pilot-ish type season, and the show picks up a little bit after that with more story arc. But the first season, Goggins was supposed to die, and they kept him around because he was such a favorite. Anyway, justified. Love it.
Nice. I'm going to do something I don't usually do, I don't think, on this podcast, and log roll a little bit. All the AI talk as of today when we're recording, which will be a couple days ago when you hear this. I have an essay in the Free Press that I've been working on for a while called What Happens If No One Reads? And it is basically my case for why you should continue to read novels and why it will serve you even in the age of AI to have an active literary life, not just because of all the bliss of reading novels, but also because it remains a kind of essential human act that you can't get a machine to do for you. So Free Press, and it is free, but you have to put your email in to sign up for their mailing list, but it's not paywall. So
right, it's not a paywall, it's a reg wall, as they call it now.
I didn't know that.
Registration wall. Yeah.
Yes.
So for me, a little bit different than what I've done, especially in the recent past. But I've just been reading through, actually for quite a while now, just classical Anglican texts that you really can't find in print. So it's all PDFs. Go on Google Books, Post-Reformation Digital Libraries, another great resource. I'm reading William Beveridge, who was the 17th bishop in the Church of England. His commentary in the 39 Articles. So that's the confession of Anglicans. Was put together first. It was the 42 articles put together in the 16th century, and then eventually came to 39 articles. I think it was in Elizabeth's reign. So it's just one of those things where, modern books are great, but basically the ratio should probably be 5-1. Read 5 old books and 1 modern book. And so that's what I'm trying to do in theology, and also reading something called I think it's called the Catholic Tradition by Vernon Staley. He was a Anglo-Catholic in the 19th century. So 2 very different centuries. And it's just kind of interesting comparing, what Anglicanism was earlier, what it was later, how those guys think about things. So just a fascinating kind of, area, and especially, a little bit different than the normal politics.
Yeah. Speaking of Anglo-Catholics, I will just end with this anecdote, which I think I brought up like 2 years ago on the podcast. I think James must have still been on it back then when I brought this up. But my favorite Tolkien story is later in his life, they said, we can convert The Lord of the Rings into audiobooks with this contraption called a tape recorder. And he was freaked out by this thing. It was like Tolkien's version of the American Indians not wanting you to take their picture, even if that's apocryphal, because it steals their soul. Yeah. But he finally relented, and Tolkien said, okay, well, we can do it, but we first have to read the Lord's Prayer into it in Welsh because the Lord's Prayer is good. And if the devil's listening, I know that he speaks Welsh.
God bless that man.
It's a fun old Tolkien anecdote, which I think I first learned, from Bradley Berzer from Hillsdale, who's a Tolkien scholar, among other things. So
nice.
Anyone who's interested in some kind of literary academic treatments of Tolkien, go check out. I think Berzer has 2 books now on, or at least 1 book on Tolkien. Worth your time. All right. Well, that is all the time we have for today. So thank you all once again for listening to the Roundtable. If you'd like to learn more about our work, go to www.claremont.org. Go /donate after claremont.org if you'd like to support our work. We appreciate it. It helps make all this possible. Go to dc.claremont.org for our latest out of the Washington, D.C. Center for the American Way of Life. Go to americanmind.org for all the stuff that Mike cranks out week in and week out, including some concluding essays this week on the assimilation feature first sparked by our colleague Andrew Beck. And go, of course, to ClaremontReviewBooks.com. The new issue is up online and should be in your mailbox shortly if it's not already. Thank you to the production and engineering crew, the brothers Gannon, Ryan and Jake Gannon. And you all, please go out, evangelize for the podcast, rate, review us, spread the word to your friends, sign up your friends and relatives, even if they don't know you are, and spread the good word. We will talk to you all next week.